Welcome in. Kind of a modified Meet the Candidates program here tonight, and I'm lucky enough to have the current sheriff with me, Tom Kochert. Tom, good to see you.
Nice to see you too, Jim. Thanks for having me.
You know, it's always fun to do these. I think people understand that I live to do these. I love Meet the Candidates night. You know, I love interviews with candidates because I am always got more darn questions than the average guy, and I hope I keep them relevant, and I hope I ask the questions that everybody that's watching and listening tonight want to hear.
Oh, great.
Because several of them come from people who are around the area.
Great.
So let's start with this one. Initially,
Sure.
we were going to have a Meet the Candidates night.
Sure.
Okay, it was going to be you and Gary Moore. We were going to get together like we always do and have a one-on-one session. Could you explain to me why you personally didn't want to do it that way?
Sure. Both Commissioner candidate Lou Hilkert and I had both kind of agreed from the outset of this election cycle, the general election cycle, that we were going to do one forum, and we did that the other night. And it's, again, the primary reason is that, speaking for me personally, I did two of these forums during the primary election cycle, and I just felt that in both situations, when you're very time limited on your answers, and then it's hard to get across exactly all the points that you wanted to make or to answer a question fully. And I just thought the public's going to be a lot better served if you have time to ask me questions, and I actually have time to answer them and tell you where I'm really coming from. So that's my only reason. I just thought the public would be better served to know Tom and what he's about and what my platform and agenda are, other than just trying to hurry in 2 minutes or 1 minute to answer something.
Well, let's get to it. How's that?
Sure.
You took over as sheriff. When you walked in on the first day, obviously, everything was brand new. You've been there a few months right now. Give me,
Sure.
first of all, the one thing that you saw around the sheriff's department that was the best thing that you've seen in that department to this moment.
Best thing that I saw when I walked in, that's a great question, but it's also, I would imagine, knowing you, probably the easiest one that I'm going to have tonight. Absolutely the deputies. I've known the vast majority of those deputies for a lot of years, especially the older ones. I served Williams County with those men and women, and I either backed them up or were backed up by them on several occasions. And when I saw them there, it was very reassuring. It was very humbling to think that now I'm their boss. I'm in charge of them. But it was also just a really neat feeling that when I walked in and I saw those folks there, and they had the look in their eye like, okay, now we're going forward. Now we're moving. We're ready. And I could see in their eyes the confidence that they had in me. So that was very reassuring when I walked in.
Contrary to that, what was the thing that was the most glaring weakness or the biggest problem you saw when you walked in the door?
There was at the same time, and it's and I don't want it to sound contradictory, but there was, I should say, a lack, not a lack of confidence in their abilities, but I saw in some of them an overall kind of a subdued morale, I should say, and it was to the point where sometimes it wasn't even subdued. There was almost a palpable morale issue with the deputies, just kind of a sense of hesitancy, and then the stuff. There were literally piles of uniforms and equipment laying around in the office that simply had not been put away, that had not been inventoried or cataloged correctly, which was just adding, and all those things, just little tangible things that I saw as far as the cleanliness of the office or things not being done properly, and just a palpable morale issue that led me to believe that that there had been a lack of leadership for a while.
And when you say for a while, we're not necessarily just singling out the couple months that Gary Moore was there, but we're going back farther before that as well, do you think? Or was it just that interim period?
Well, I'm sure that it's going to go back for there now, and absolutely, I don't want anyone to get the impression that each sheriff that I'm putting anybody down. Each sheriff is going to run his office the way that he sees fit. What I'm saying is that what I noticed, in my professional opinion, when I walked in that door, was several tangible visual cues that, in my experience, means that there had been a lack of leadership.
So what have you done to change them?
First of all, I put that stuff away. we started physically cleaning up. Chief Lehman, I can't thank him enough. He got busy cleaning up, literally, and I mean quite literally, cleaning up the shop, putting uniforms and equipment away, categorizing. We started some inventories on both equipment and uniform items for the deputies. One of the first things I did was call my sergeants in and tell them that they are my shift supervisors, that they run their shifts, that I have full confidence in their abilities. We started establishing a pattern of accountability and parameters by reinforcing policies and procedures. Sheriff Beck, way back in 2009, established some very clear policies and procedures, and most of those, as I've read through them, are actually very well written, and some of them are very applicable. Now, I'm in the process of updating a lot of those simply because 2020, 2021 is not 2009. Mm-hmm. So obviously those are going to need some updating. But he established a very clear pattern of accountability through policies and procedures and accountability, and that's what I brought back into the office. But in such a way to give my sergeants the latitude to make decisions, to basically just do their job without, fear of reprisal from above, or just to try to establish a new sense of confidence in them. And it is absolutely night and day what I see out of them as supervisors. The morale, the way things are progressing. It is like you have flipped a switch. Simply, I've used the adage, if you just give the horse his head, but hang on to the reins, and he knows the trail, let him run.
So during this cleanup process, is that when we found the munitions and all that had been transferred over to Fort Wayne? Is that where these came about?
Yes, that's part of it. That was, when I first looked in the arms room, that's when we found those. And again, I want to make it abundantly clear that any resource or item that the Williams County Sheriff's Office, with Tom Kochert as sheriff, any resource that we have, any item I have, or that any law enforcement agency would ever need, I want to make it abundantly clear that that is available. But in the same way, I want to make it abundantly clear that in 2020 and 2021, there is a right way and a wrong way to do things when items are transferred, especially across state lines, when things, it's simple managerial process, Jim. That's what we have to get back to, simple managerial process. If that's not being done at the very top level in the office, then the processes of evidence collection or the investigatory process, or the way that we put cases together, the way that any administrative function that you would expect from a sheriff's office, if I'm not doing it right at the top level, then that's going to extrapolate into my troops, and it's going to filter down through them, and that's unacceptable. So it has to, if you want the office to run effectively and efficiently, you have to start at the top, do things right, manage the office correctly, simple administrative functions, and that will extrapolate down, and that's how you bring about departmental efficiency.
It became pretty much a political football. Okay, if you talk to Mr. Moore and his group, they believe you politicized it. You took it to the commissioners and you said, "Look at this," and here's something that's going wrong, and it just so happens maybe that's the guy I'm going to run against. Okay, but from his viewpoint, you were targeting him when you went in that night.
That's unfortunate that that's his viewpoint. Again, as I said, I believe in an earlier interview with you that The political football is only a political football when one side's kicking it, and the commissioners have control over all county property. It's not a secret. It's a fact. And for me to ask around, what do I do with all this stuff? I could have got the same answer from 20 people. I could have got 20 different answers. But the fact remains, at the end of the day, the commissioners were the ones that would either say, you go to Katie Zartman, the prosecutor, and get an answer, what she wants you to do with this stuff, or yes, there was a resolution from us, here's what you can do with this stuff. Either way, the arrow was pointing at the commissioners, and that's where I went. Cut to the chase, get an answer, and get it done. It was not a political move. I'm sorry that it's being viewed that way, but it is what it is. I did what I did.
The other side of that, the equation, I think if I look at the landscape right now, and I look at the things that people are questioning about Tom Kochert, okay?
Sure.
The second item always goes back to that idea that you've never been a sheriff before, you've never been a police officer before, you've never really walked the beat and driven the car and rallied the troops in the past, okay? You were a game warden for a number of years, okay? So for one last time before the election, okay,
yes.
give me your best shot at that one.
One last time, and it's not hard for folks to do their own research on this either. State wildlife officers in Ohio, and Jim, this is simply the best, simplest answer I can possibly give. I mean, we can. Unfortunately, the other side has beat this horse that I have no experience to the point where it's it's kind of exasperating. State wildlife officers in Ohio are commissioned peace officers by the Ohio Peace Officer Training Council. That is the same commission, the same certificate, if you will, in your file that every police officer, municipal, in the state of Ohio, or every sheriff's deputy in the state of Ohio has to have. Because at the end of that certification process, you take the Ohio Peace Officer Certification exam. Mm-hmm. And once you take that and pass it, you're a certified peace officer. And I'm now in my 28th, going on my 29th year, without a break, of being a certified peace officer. As a state wildlife officer, not only are you commissioned as a peace officer, but you have statutory authority over the entire Ohio Revised Code. Now that means pick a crime, any crime, with statewide jurisdiction. So that is as close to a state police officer that Ohio commissions. So for someone to say that I've not walked a beat or driven the car or filed criminal cases, folks get caught up on type of violation, folks get caught up on degree of violation, and I guess my biggest issue with that is I'm not a commissioned officer to only handle felonies, nor am I only a commissioned officer to handle misdemeanors. I'm commissioned as a law enforcement officer, and the oath that you take is to uphold the laws of the state of Ohio, which is exactly close to 2,000 times what I did in 13 different court jurisdictions all over Northwest Ohio. The laws of the state of Ohio, as varied as they may be, are exactly what I did, exactly what I upheld, and exactly what I'll continue to do. As sheriff, it doesn't matter if my complaint is the guy blowing the four-way stop down the road every afternoon at 3 o'clock. I'm going to have a deputy there to pull that guy over. You blow it or roll it, we're going to get you. It's also my job if you call and say, hey, I think somebody just got shot next door. We're going to be there too. So I'm not going to pick and choose when I'm going to enforce the law based on the complexity, based on the degree, or based on the level of the offense or the type of offense. The law is the law, and that's the oath you took. As a wildlife officer, we encountered, you name it, run the gamut across the Ohio Revised Code. Investigations, shootings. When you have a jurisdiction that is titled "The State of Ohio, Her Territories, Possessions, and Holdings," including the Ohio waters of Lake Erie and the Ohio waters of the Ohio River, that's a pretty good chunk of real estate that we're responsible for with full police powers.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that qualifies me as a policeman.
So you arrested people.
Yes, sir.
You had to go to court at times and probably testify or press charges.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Every case, every time.
All right. The one question I guess I would pull out is obviously the question of basically overseeing a staff, overseeing a group of men or a group of men and women that might be underneath of you. What's your history there?
Well, my history there as a wildlife officer, and especially as you progress, we don't have rank structure. I should say we. The Ohio Department of Natural Resources, the Division of Wildlife, does not have a rank structure. You are a wildlife officer assigned to a county. Now, supervisors with the Division of Wildlife, there's just very few, and they are multi-county supervisors, and it's basically an administrative title. And then each 20-some county district will have a law enforcement supervisor. But each individual officer, and I'll use myself as the example, when I was assigned Williams County, part of my job duties was to write and enact law enforcement projects, and those included aircraft projects, night enforcement projects, with or without aircraft. Those would entail personnel from 8 Ohio counties. If it was an aircraft project, on several occasions that included not only Ohio personnel but Indiana and Michigan personnel as well. And whoever wrote the project, you basically are in charge of that project for that night. You're responsible for the administration of, number one, writing the project, which included organization of the aircraft, coming from Columbus, where he's going to fly, what his grids were, where my ground crews were going to be, but then also arrest data, from, in some cases, all 3 states, and what charges, et cetera, what courts they were filed into, and responsible for getting all that data in. So when you do that multiple times, over the course of a year, that is, as boots on the ground law enforcement supervision as you can get, managing. There's a lot to manage there. When you start flying planes around 3 states and you've got state lines and potential federal violations in the act and some federal agencies involved, and so that's a lot of responsibility. Additionally, through some of my civic organizations, was a chairman of a school board for a couple years. Oversaw quite a staff there, hired, fired, etc. More importantly, the state sent me, the ODNR sent me to the Ohio State University. It has a program called Management Advancement for the Public Service, and that is basically where leaders of state agencies, state department heads, etc., are sent through this budgeting, managerial, supervision, schooling, and process. And basically what they're doing is grooming the next generation of department heads, department leaders, etc. So I went to the Fawcett Center there at OSU, a series of courses over 4 or 5 years in my career, and was able to accomplish that. So outside involvements, managing, budgeting, everything from school budgets to church budgets to, et cetera. And now with the sheriff's office, as we speak, I'm writing the budget for the sheriff's office, and this week. So far, I'm crossing my fingers here. So far, no glitches there. So, not, Jim, it's not an issue. The experience is there. I've done it. If I didn't know how to do it, I wouldn't be here telling you I do.
Let me ask you one more question. We'll take a quick break. You've been in the job for a few months. In over your head, or is everything working pretty well?
Anyone that walks in there and sits down in that chair and says, I am in absolute, complete mastery of this, is a fool. I don't think that person exists in the state of Ohio. Am I in over my head? No, I'm not. Do you have to tread water some days? Oh, yeah. But again, proper application of managerial techniques, put a staff under you and a command structure, people around you that know their job and do it well, and don't be afraid to ask questions of the right people. That's exactly what I've been doing, and things are going extraordinarily well.
Williams County Sheriff Tom Kochert is my guest right now as we're in the middle of our Meet the Candidates night here on a Tuesday night. We'll step away. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation here on the Q 96.5. Meet the Candidates tonight. It's all being brought to you tonight by your local American Family Insurance agent, Danielle Van Atta, the main stops of Northwest Ohio, Culligan Sales and Service of Northwest Ohio, Midwest Community Federal Credit Union, and the Bryan Area Chamber of Commerce Holiday Decorating Committee. Maybe one of the tougher questions I'm going to ask you tonight. How's that? We'll start it out. We got you warmed up, so let's give you a hard one, okay?
Okay.
Your opponent is endorsed by every police chief in Williams County, okay? Most of them good, solid Republican guys, because this is a Republican county, okay? Why do you think they're all endorsing Gary Moore at this point in time?
Jim, I don't even want to try to delve into their minds of why they would be endorsing, my opponent. However, my answer to that is they have known me since I walked into Williams County. And all those years, I was assigned to Williams County as the wildlife officer. Everybody knew who Tom Kochert was. I was the Williams County wildlife officer. Most of them had my phone number in their phone. Most of them knew me by first name. There's not one of their offices I had not been in, frequent basis. I've known their officers. I worked with their officers. I've backed them up. I remember a lot of them, their first day on the job as an officer, let alone as chief. And in my mind, we had a very good working relationship. I never had an issue, Jim. I can honestly sit here and tell you I don't know of a single issue that I ever had with any of them on any reason. Something happened after I won the primary election and became the Republican candidate. You tell me what that something is. I don't know.
I'm going to ask your opponent when I get a chance to sit down with him.
Right.
But do you honestly believe, and this is a question I'm going to ask him as well, do you honestly believe that if it would have been one of the other candidates that won, that the Republican Party would have, or that the other side, because you're the Republican candidate, so let me get back on track, that the other side would have tried to mount some sort of independent candidate for this office?
I would not even want to speculate on that. Woulda, shoulda, coulda. If another candidate would have won the primary, what the Chiefs would have done, or who they would have endorsed, who knows? Again, I'm not even going to try to speak for them. What I'd like the folks to know is that I have absolutely nothing against these Chiefs. I have there's not a thing I can put my finger on. There's absolutely no wall, no barrier, no reason that we can't communicate, that we can't get along. I have reached out to them in various ways since I've been the sheriff. Several of them have been in my office. We've had good conversations. I went to the chiefs meetings over at Sam's in Blakesley. I'm not even going to try to come up why in the world they would endorse somebody other than me, other than to say they can endorse who they want to endorse, just like anybody else.
Sure.
And that's their call. And
you believe, though, if indeed you're elected, that relationship between you and all the police chiefs in Williams County are going to be a good one?
Absolutely. And I just said, and I'll reiterate, there is no wall, no barrier. Not only does it take two to cooperate, it takes two not to cooperate. And I'm telling you, Tom Kochert is going to cooperate. If they have any kind of an issue, if they have some kind of a problem with me, if there's something that's just unsettled with them, I don't know what that is. And the only way I'm ever going to know what that is if they get a hold of me and say, can we have coffee? And I've offered that. Can we have coffee? Can we have lunch? Can we talk? It's up to them. Give me a shout. We can work it out. Since I've been the sheriff, on no occasions have we failed to send a deputy or any of my resources or any of my staff to assist in any way they've ever asked. Any of them that have needed assistance, we've provided it. And in several occasions, they've come to my office seeking assistance, and I've provided it. I mean, to my fullest capability, without, there's no screaming matches, there's no yelling matches, there's no drama behind the scene. Jim, that's all I can say. I mean, they can endorse who they want to endorse. Tom Kochert's door is open. I'm willing to work with all of them.
Let's go back into the department here real quick. One of the first things you did was, and you've alluded to it a little bit here today, was bring two gentlemen and co-assign them, basically, I guess to say, as a detective as well as being an officer and a member of the sheriff's department.
Right.
Why did you feel that was so important? Okay, and has that maybe left us a little thin on the other side of the department, or how does that work?
Great. And first of all, thank you for asking that, because I get asked that a lot, and it was truly one of those decisions. It took me a while to make it, but let me answer your first question. Why did I do that, or why did I feel compelled to do that? Back up before the primary election, we had an opportunity, and when I say we, it was myself, Chief Livengood, and Sean Folk, to one-on-one have a chat with the deputies, without the other guys being there, and just to answer questions from the deputies and let them kind of get a feel for each of us and see who they, who they felt comfortable with. Their union authorized that. Sheriff Towns authorized that at the time it happened. So there was nothing behind the scenes there. And that was actually asked of me, by the deputies that night. Would you in your structure include position of at least a detective? And I told him then, absolutely, I'm going to have a detective. Actually, Jim, it absolutely dumbfounded me that we didn't have one. Of any law enforcement agency. Our agency, the agency that I, spent my career with, we had investigators, which are basically detectives, and that's what they do, all the forensics, the ballistics, etc. So, fast forward to the forums. I believe at the first forum at the Veterans Hall, and during the primary, that question was asked. Will your structure include a detective? And
Yes.
my answer, and Jim, you heard it that night, I said, absolutely. Well, I'm going to keep one on the man unit. Absolutely, under no circumstances am I doing away with the man unit. And I'll cooperate with them fully as a member of that control board. And yes, I'm going to have at least a detective. So once I assumed office, I started looking at the manpower that I had, where they were arranged. But again, I started looking at the different cases that some of those officers were handling and the complexity of those cases. You see, again, as I mentioned earlier about types and degree of cases, don't focus on the type and the degree, focus on the complexity. There's misdemeanor cases out there that are going to take much more time and effort to solve than, some felony cases are a one interview done, go to the grand jury. There's misdemeanors out there that you're going to be talking to the neighbors, you're going to be 14 interviews here and there, running all over the place, gathering evidence, and when it's done, yes, you get a conviction, it's a misdemeanor conviction. Again, we're law enforcement officers, that's what we do. And if you were the victim of that misdemeanor, you'd kind of want me to do the whole job, regardless of if it was an M or an F behind it. So that's, after viewing that and looking at the caseload, I had to weigh, okay, yes, I could keep these guys on the road, dressed up in uniform, every day, out there on patrol, go get them. I had to weigh that with, I could make them a detective, and if they took the complex cases, then the road units that are left out there have that much less on their plate. In other words, ease some of the pressure or burden on them, so now they have time to start running traffic. Now they have time to start serving papers. Now they have time. And you know what? I rolled the dice. I got a hold of the man unit because, Jim, in a not so distant past, if somebody broke into your barn to steal your tractor, it was because I like your tractor, I'm going to steal it. Now I'm going to break into your barn to steal your tractor because it's worth this much fentanyl or this much heroin or this much. I mean, that literally is very close to the connection we have between major crimes and narcotics. So that philosophy led me to call the commander of the man unit and the Williams County prosecutor, who is going to be she's not only my legal counsel, but all of our cases go through the Williams County prosecutor, and that's who's going to be actually reviewing our work and putting our cases together. I called them and said, would you come up with interview questions, and would you sit on an interview panel with me and my chief deputy, because I'm going to interview for a detective. They were ecstatic. Both of them said, yes, absolutely, they did. They came up with a fantastic interview, a very hard interview. Two very talented deputies, Deputy McCord and Baldwin, applied, and it was literally, it was pretty much an even match, and that was the consensus amongst, the interviewers. And I said, if I move them laterally, did my homework with the union. Remember, I was a union steward for the state. We were a union shop, which that's a union shop, and so I, as far as unions, union negotiations, union contracts, et cetera, the contract the deputies, operate under is very similar to the one I operated under, and was a steward for that for, a good portion of my career. So that's not a native language to me, this whole union thing. So after consulting with, the union folks to make sure that everything was on the up and up, if I made those a lateral assignment instead of a position change, okay, their classification is still a road deputy. So on any given day, my chief can call one of them and say, hey, we're going to be in man short, we had somebody call off, or we had a problem on first, okay, I need you to come in uniform and you're covering the road on first. Okay, I can still do that. Okay, now the idea is, as we progress and we hire, more and more deputies, and as the agency grows and adapts, that that's going to be less and less necessary that I have these two. But just this last pay period is when I want to say, turned them loose on their own to start actually put them on the rotation, schedule to start really focusing on crimes. And you just saw the news release. It took less than 48 hours. They had a huge case, and less than 6 days after they were handed it to it, it's probably going to end up in the hands of a grand jury, and that's some major cases. I mean, and all I can say is keep watching the newspapers, because these guys are like beagles in the briars. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there that needs focus and attention, and look what happens in just having a short period of time to focus and think. Look what happens. I mean, it's immediate. So that tells me that my decision was absolutely correct, and the road's still being handled. The sergeants, I'm not hearing any complaints from the sergeants. Actually, they're saying, yeah, you guys do have time to run traffic now. You do have time to start serving these papers. And so the sergeants are really stepping up too, and it's working fantastic.
Let's get into something that you hit upon a minute ago. It's in your political ads right now at this point in time, and that is the drug issue in Williams County. Okay, how bad is the drug issue in Williams County?
It's the drug issue is bad. Opioid use, is on the rise. Overdoses. It's to say that Williams County does not have a drug issue would be ridiculous. We do. The fact of the matter is, Jim, unfortunately, we do. When you can start tracing a lot of major crimes, property crimes, it all comes back to the money. It all comes back to the drugs. That's endemic of a serious problem. The way you combat that is to attack it at both ends, both the property crimes, a lot of the sexual assaults, a lot of the domestic issues and crimes, in addition to with the man unit's cooperation. And I can't, I'm going to give them another shout out. Cannot speak highly enough of the man unit and what those folks do. It is just absolutely incredible. If folks knew what they did on a daily basis, to combat this, it's just incredible. But when you start attacking it at both ends, now there's not a loose end. You're not just focusing on the drug crimes where there's a lot of unsolved property crimes, because I've often, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, Jim, but when asked what's the most serious crime in Williams County, what's the most serious issue right now as far as crime? Well, that's an objection. It's if it's your barn getting broken into, that's the most serious crime in Williams County right now, isn't it?
Sure.
Because you want your stuff back.
You bet.
If your kid just got Narcan because he's an addict, then drugs are the worst issue in the world. What are you going to do to solve that, Sheriff? If you or a loved one was a victim of a sexual assault, then what are you going to do about these sexual assaults? Or if you're a victim of domestic violence, what are you going to do about this domestic violence? So, it really depends, Jim, when you say, what's the most serious crime going on in Williams County? Everybody's going to give you a different answer on that. So my answer to that is, how about I get a couple guys to focus on the stuff other than the drugs that are serious, complex crimes, your barn, the sexual assaults, the domestic violence problems. In addition to having the man unit cooperation on the drugs, we can all work together and figure this out and make it a pretty unsafe place for the bad guys.
How safe is it for the kids in Williams County? I mean, the point was brought up at the meeting the other night about human trafficking. Okay, because we're close to the I-75 highway.
Sure.
We had a situation when the previous sheriff was here where we had a youngster that was had fallen through the cracks in the system. Okay. And it did seem like that sheriff was jumping up and down and waving his arms at times about the problems that we had, and it still seemed to fall through the cracks.
Sure.
Have we cemented those cracks in that side of the equation now?
I don't know if we've cemented those cracks, Jim, and unfortunately with current societal trends, I don't know if cracks like those or cracks like the opioid cracks you see cracks all over in society with crime and like almost a general sense of lawlessness looking around some of the major cities. 15 years ago, would you have imagined that some of our inner cities, how want are you to drive into some of those sections of
Sure.
LA, New York? I mean, it's
Sure, Chicago, yeah.
Chicago, anywhere.
Yeah, no doubt.
Now, to put that in perspective, let's talk about Chicago. We just gave those folks in Chicago that would be behaving in that manner the best reason in the world to come and visit Williams County, at the travel stop right off the turnpike now. 3.5 hours ago I was in Chicago, or 8-10 hours ago I was in New York City, or Cleveland, or wherever, and now I'm in Williams County, and hey, I need a soda pop, hey, I need a coffee. There's a travel stop, and that's where one of my deputies rolls in on a drive-through, and we are now face to face with the inner city issues that you're seeing on the news. And that's why, like a broken record, I've said that it is absolutely imperative that I make these guys what I call a one-stop shop. The socio-cultural trends that are going on today are endemic all over America, and Williams County is not immune to that. We have to train these guys to be not just a rural sheriff's deputy that handled this stuff as we did in the 70s and 80s. This is a rural county. You're going to have domestics and petty thefts and the occasional felony. Here. We also have to be very cognizant of what's going on in this world around us, that it is indeed a different world. Now add the opioid crisis and all that entails, that whole ball of wax, the lawlessness that comes with that. Add in, the use of Narcan, add in, now the property crimes, add in the family and the child abuse crimes. So, to get back to your question about the kids, are children safe in Williams County? I would have to say I firmly believe that yes, they are, and we're doing everything we can to keep them that way. However, safe, define safe. I mean, who rightfully, Jim, who can define, are they safe? For me to sit here as the county's chief law enforcement officer and say you are absolutely safe at all points in time, you can walk around, you can do whatever, you can turn your child loose, that would be totally ridiculous for me to make that statement. I mean, I can't control a whole society of lawlessness, or a whole trend, societal trend towards lawlessness. So, do parents is due diligence, is a level of due diligence on behalf of guardians or parents, has that stepped up? Is the level that's required now needed, a little bit higher on their behalf? Oh, absolutely. That's the world we live in. I surely can't stop traffic and isolate us and say, well, we here in Williams County are safe. You remember the case of the young lady in Fulton County here just a few years ago that was riding her bike, and then that became a big, with the Sierra, and it's tragic, and that's one of the reasons that I decided that my career, my background, my experience, my huge training file and a law enforcement background. I think Williams County can do better, and for the widow or widower that lives on one of our farms here in Williams County, that's getting along in years but still lives on the home place out on the farm, every little bump in the night, every little car driving up the road, every person walking up the road, or somebody knocking on the door for any reason, that's a scary event. And folks need to know that our deputies aren't going to look at them like they're crazy when they call us and say, I'm afraid. And we understand, yeah, right, and probably rightfully so. They're immersed in that through the media all the time. They're immersed in, that's the reality of the world, and that's due diligence that they should be exercising. But as far as safe, and I'll say that in quotes for the listeners, I do believe that we are. Know that I am doing my utmost to train these deputies and to develop a system of patrol and professionalism that makes you safer, again in quotes, but again I'm going to ask you to define safe.
Yeah, it's tough, especially in the world that we live in now. I agree.
Exactly.
Tom, first of all, thank you for all the time you've given me today. I really appreciate that, and I'll leave this conversation with this by allowing you to look forward, okay? I think both the candidates I'm going to talk to are going to probably be sitting in that chair assuming they're going to win, okay? And come the early stage of November, they're going to be the new sheriff in town as far as unofficially. You'll still be in the job until everything changes hands. But looking forward, what are the plans? You've had to look ahead. What do the next 4 years bring for Williams County if Tom Kochert is sheriff?
Great question, Jim. And actually, it's not a question. I have much more than the next 4 years planned out, even before I won the primary election. And I would consider that be foolish, to say I want to be the sheriff, and then you don't really have a clue of what it is you're going to do. I've already largely started doing what I want to do, restructuring the office to include those detectives. Again, a focus on the crimes to start combating this lawlessness that we just talked about, and to make folks as safe as can be. I've also started the pattern of quarterly trainings. I've used the term, I'm going to make these guys one-stop shops. Yes, it's a rural county. Yes, they're going to be rural county sheriff deputies. But they're also going to be able to stand with the best of the best, whether they're from a big city or not. And that goes through all of their police disciplines, whether it is their investigatory ability, whether it's their report writing, the way they put investigations together. They can do the whole job every time with a chain of command in place that holds them accountable to that. And through those trainings, firearms trainings, to every police discipline that you can name on a quarterly basis. And I mean that. Quarterly means 4 times a year. Rain, snow, sleet. Our mantra was, if it ain't raining, you ain't training. So I don't let a little bit of snow or cold weather or rain scare us off. But also, I want to develop an office where the general public, when they look at the sheriff's office, they see professionalism, they see courtesy, they see a very well run, very well managed, but above all, a very open, first of all, sheriff, the head of that. Somebody they can talk to, somebody they can call, somebody that is not going to be able to answer every single question they ever call and ask me, but somebody that will find them the answer. to every single question they try to ask me. Service on a level, my faith tells me that the greatest among you is a servant, and that's my mantra. I'm here to serve. We're here to help. As far as other agendas for the office, I don't necessarily want to spill all of the beans, but just know that the Williams County Sheriff's Office a year from now, under Tom Kochert, is going to look night and day from what it did a year ago, and then a year from then, it's going to look night and day as it did then. My agenda is an evolving agenda, which means I'm going to do A, B, C, and D. And if A, B, and D worked perfectly, then the next phase is going to involve how can we make C better and E better because they didn't work the first time. You see, it needs to evolve. And you don't stop. Once you get something going, you don't stop. You strive to be better. You always look ahead. Pay attention to what's going on in this world. We're going into 2021, and that's a whole lot different world than it was even 5 years ago. To take a step backwards, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, the way we police, the way we treat people, the way we train would be absolutely devastating to the people of this county. It would be just a matter of time before major problems come in. We can't go there, Jim. We simply can't go there. So that's my agenda, and that's my guarantee to the folks. I'm going to make it better to the best of my ability. It's going to be a department you'll be proud of.
Tom, again, thank you for your time. Best of luck here in a week. And I hope that if you are the successful candidate, that we get to do this more often.
Anytime, Jim. Thank you so much.
Tom Kochert has been our guest in this portion of our Meet the Candidates night. You were at the Q, and we have more coming your way after this.